There is a food so powerful that armies have carried it into war zones, billion-dollar corporations have built empires around it, and entire cities have fought over who makes it best. Every second, somewhere on Earth, thousands of people are lifting a slice toward their mouths. Children beg for it. Presidents eat it on camera. Astronauts have taken versions of it into space. It is served in royal palaces and in gas stations. It appears at birthday parties, funerals, first dates, and celebrations of victory. And yet, for most of its history, this food was considered something only the poor would eat. Its story begins not in luxury, but in smoke-filled alleys, crowded ports, and the desperate struggle to survive. Because pizza, the world's favorite food, was born from poverty. And perhaps the strangest part of all is this. The ingredients that define pizza today came from different corners of the world and, for centuries, had never even met each other. The bread came from one civilization, the cheese from another, the tomato from a continent Europeans didn't even know existed. If history had unfolded just slightly differently, pizza would never have happened. But it did. And hidden inside every slice is a story of empires, exploration, famine, migration, war, organized crime, industrialization, and globalization. A story that spans more than 10,000 years. And by the end of it, you may never look at pizza the same way again. Because pizza isn't just food. It is history you can hold in your hands. Long before anyone uttered the word pizza, humanity had already fallen in love with one of its oldest inventions, flatbread. Imagine the world nearly 12,000 years ago. No cities, no nations, no written language, only small groups of humans moving across the landscape, carrying fire wherever they went. At some point, someone crushed grains into a rough powder, mixed it with water, and placed it on a hot stone near the fire. That simple act changed human history. Flatbread became one of humanity's first truly universal foods. Ancient Egyptians baked it. The Greeks ate it. Persians carried it across deserts. Romans served it throughout their empire. And here's where the story becomes fascinating. Almost every civilization developed its own version. In India, there was naan. In the Middle East, pita. In Central Asia, lavash. In Italy, focaccia. Separated by thousands of miles, humans kept arriving at the same conclusion. Bread tastes better when it's flat, portable, and shared. But occasionally, people began placing things on top of it. The ancient Persians reportedly baked flatbreads topped with cheese and dates. Greek soldiers ate plankuntos, bread covered with oils, herbs, and cheese. Roman writings describe flatbreads adorned with ingredients remarkably familiar to modern eyes. At first glance, it feels as though pizza has always existed. But one ingredient was missing. One ingredient so controversial that Europeans once believed it could kill you. The tomato. To understand pizza, we have to leave Europe entirely and cross the Atlantic to the civilizations of the Americas. Thousands of years before Christopher Columbus sailed west, indigenous peoples in present-day Peru, Ecuador, and Mexico had already domesticated wild tomatoes. They cultivated them, cooked with them, and incorporated them into daily life. To them, tomatoes were ordinary. To Europeans, they would become terrifying. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Americas during the late 15th and early 16th centuries, they encountered an entirely new world of foods. Potatoes, corn, cacao, peppers, and tomatoes. These foods would eventually reshape global civilization. But Europeans didn't know that yet. Imagine seeing a tomato for the first time. Bright red, shiny, suspiciously similar to poisonous plants already growing in Europe. Many people believed tomatoes were dangerous. Some thought they caused madness. Others believed they were toxic. For generations, wealthy Europeans refused to eat them. Ironically, historians now suspect some aristocrats did become ill after eating tomatoes. Not because tomatoes were poisonous, but because the acid in them reacted with the lead plates used by the upper classes. The poor, eating from wooden dishes, remained perfectly fine. History has a sense of humor, and this tiny misunderstanding would delay the birth of pizza for centuries. By the 17th century, however, attitudes slowly began to change. In southern Italy, particularly around Naples, the poor had fewer luxuries and fewer reasons to fear new foods. If something was cheap, filling, and kept hunger away, they would eat it. Naples in the 1700s was unlike the postcard image many imagine today. It was one of Europe's largest cities, overflowing with laborers, sailors, immigrants, and the desperately poor. The streets were crowded. The air carried the smell of fish, smoke, and sweat. Entire families lived in tiny rooms. Disease was common. Hunger was constant. And yet, amid the chaos, something extraordinary was happening. Street vendors began selling inexpensive flatbreads topped with garlic, lard, anchovies, cheese, and eventually tomatoes. These were not meals of prestige. They were survival. Workers needed food they could eat quickly with their hands. They couldn't afford elaborate meals. They needed something cheap, hot, and satisfying. Pizza was the answer. At the time, many wealthy visitors considered it disgusting. Travel writers described Neapolitans eating in the streets with a mixture of fascination and horror. One observer remarked that pizza looked like a piece of bread taken from the sewer. Imagine that. The food now loved by billions was once regarded as filthy street food. But the people of Naples didn't care. They knew something everyone else didn't. Pizza worked. It filled empty stomachs. It brought people together. And it could be endlessly adapted. A little more cheese if times were good. Less if times were hard. Anchovies when available. Garlic when nothing else could be afforded. It was poverty transformed into creativity. But then, in 1889, something happened that changed pizza forever. And it all began with a queen. By the late 19th century, Italy itself was still young. The country had only recently unified, bringing together regions with wildly different identities. The monarchy faced a challenge. How do you convince millions of people that they belong to the same nation? Symbols, flags, stories, shared traditions. Enter Queen Margherita of Savoy. According to popular legend, while visiting Naples in 1889, Queen Margherita grew tired of elaborate French cuisine and requested local dishes. A pizzaiolo named Raffaele Esposito was summoned. He prepared several pizzas, but one stood out. It featured red tomatoes, white mozzarella, green basil, the colors of the Italian flag. The Queen reportedly loved it, and Esposito named it in her honor, Pizza Margherita. Now, historians debate how much of this story is entirely true. Some details remain disputed, but whether every element happened exactly as told is almost beside the point, because stories shape history as much as facts. And this story elevated pizza from the streets of Naples into the national imagination. Suddenly, pizza wasn't merely poor people's food. It was Italian. But Italy itself was about to experience enormous upheaval. Economic hardship pushed millions of Italians to make an impossible choice: leave home or remain in poverty. Between the late 19th and early 20th centuries, more than 4 million Italians emigrated to the United States. They carried very little with them. A few belongings, their language, their traditions, and their recipes. Among them was pizza. At first, America barely noticed. Italian immigrants settled into neighborhoods in New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and New Haven. They recreated pieces of home in unfamiliar cities. Small bakeries began selling pizza to immigrant communities. One of the earliest documented American pizzerias opened in New York City in 1905. At the time, pizza remained an ethnic food. Most Americans had never heard of it. And if you had told someone in 1910 that pizza would one day become America's favorite comfort food, they would have laughed. Hamburgers were American. Apple pie was American. Pizza? Pizza was something immigrants ate. But history was preparing another twist. Because sometimes the most powerful force in spreading culture isn't trade. It's war. When the United States entered World War II, millions of American soldiers crossed the Atlantic. Many found themselves stationed in Italy. There, they encountered something unforgettable. Hot pizza pulled from wood-fired ovens. Simple, cheap, delicious. Young soldiers returned home carrying stories, not of military strategy or foreign policy, but of food. And this phenomenon repeats throughout history more often than people realize. Tea spread through empires, coffee traveled along trade routes, and pizza hitchhiked home with soldiers. After World War II, America experienced unprecedented prosperity. Suburbs expanded. Cars became symbols of freedom. Television entered living rooms. And pizza arrived at precisely the right moment. Families wanted convenience. Teenagers wanted gathering places. Businesses wanted scalable products. Pizza delivered all three. By the 1950s and 1960s, pizzerias began appearing across the United States. Then came the innovations. Deep dish in Chicago. Thin crust in New York. Clam pizza in New Haven. Detroit-style pizza baked in industrial steel pans. Each city adapted pizza to its own identity. And perhaps that's the secret of pizza's success. Unlike many traditional foods, pizza doesn't resist change. It welcomes it. Put pineapple on it and millions will argue. Add barbecue chicken and someone will call it sacrilege. Top it with gold flakes and someone else will pay hundreds of dollars. Pizza survives every argument. Because pizza has never been one thing. It has always been many things. But another revolution was coming. One that would transform pizza from a local favorite into a global empire. The year was 1958. In Wichita, Kansas, two brothers borrowed $600 from their mother and opened a small restaurant. They called it Pizza Hut. The sign they purchased only had room for 8 letters. A few years later, another company emerged. Then another. Soon, names like Domino's and Little Caesars began spreading across America. What these companies understood was revolutionary. Pizza wasn't just food. It was logistics. Think about it. Pizza travels well. It feeds groups. Can be standardized. And most importantly, it can be delivered. This realization transformed pizza into one of the greatest business success stories in human history. Suddenly, technology became part of the recipe. Assembly lines, telephone orders, heat-retaining boxes, delivery systems, marketing campaigns. By the 1980s and 1990s, pizza had become deeply embedded in popular culture. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles loved it. Movies featured it. Sporting events depended on it. Entire generations grew up associating pizza with happiness. Birthdays meant pizza. Sleepovers meant pizza. Friday nights meant pizza. And yet, behind this seemingly simple food lay a vast global network. Consider what it takes to make a single pizza today. Wheat from one country, tomatoes from another, cheese from a third, olive oil crossing oceans, machines manufacturing boxes, drivers navigating cities, software coordinating deliveries. A pizza is globalization made edible. But globalization has consequences. As American chains expanded internationally, pizza underwent one of the most fascinating transformations in culinary history. Japan added mayonnaise and squid. Brazil embraced green peas. India introduced paneer and tandoori chicken. Sweden famously combined curry and bananas. Yes, bananas. If 19th century Neapolitans could see modern pizza, they might not recognize it. Or perhaps they would. After all, they understood adaptation better than anyone. Remember, pizza was born from necessity. Necessity doesn't care about purity, cares about survival. And this raises an uncomfortable question. Who owns pizza? Is it Italy? America? The world? UNESCO provided one answer in 2017 when it recognized the art of Neapolitan pizzuolo as part of humanity's intangible cultural heritage. Not pizza itself, the craft, the knowledge, the tradition passed from one generation to another. Because while recipes evolve, human stories endure. Yet even this recognition reveals a deeper truth. Pizza occupies a strange position in history. It belongs everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. It is fiercely local and unmistakably global. Few foods have achieved this. And pizza's journey wasn't always smooth. Economic crises affected it. Wars disrupted supply chains. Even organized crime found opportunities within the pizza business. In the United States, law enforcement agencies occasionally used the term pizza connection to describe criminal networks linked to pizzerias during the 20th century. Entire investigations unfolded around restaurants serving far more than food. Once again, pizza found itself entangled with history's darker currents. Then came another unexpected chapter, the digital age. The internet changed pizza in ways no one could have predicted. Suddenly, people could order food without speaking to another human being. Algorithms learned customer preferences. Companies tracked delivery times down to the second. Drones were tested. Robots entered kitchens. Artificial intelligence began predicting demand. Somewhere in Naples, a 19th century street vendor would find this incomprehensible. Yet the goal remains unchanged. Feed hungry people quickly. And then, in 2020, the world stopped. Cities emptied. Businesses closed. Families remained indoors. The COVID-19 pandemic altered nearly every aspect of modern life. But pizza endured. In many countries, delivery drivers became unlikely heroes, transporting comfort through silent streets. When people felt isolated, they ordered pizza. When they celebrated surviving another difficult week, they ordered pizza. When they couldn't gather in restaurants, pizza came to them. It had survived empires. It had survived migration. It had survived world wars. Of course, it survived a pandemic. Because resilience has always been baked into its DNA. There is another reason pizza matters, though few people talk about it. Pizza may be humanity's most democratic food. Think about a pizza sitting in the center of a table. Everyone reaches toward the same meal. There is no hierarchy. No ceremony. No complicate etiquette. A billionaire and a construction worker eat pizza the same way. With their hands. That isn't true for many foods. History is filled with meals designed to separate people by class. Pizza does the opposite. It invites participation. Perhaps that's why it has succeeded where countless other foods have faded. It asks almost nothing of us. Only that we gather together. And gathering together has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. Anthropologists often remind us that civilization itself emerged through shared meals. Humans sat around fires. They exchanged stories. They built trust. Eventually, they built societies. In a strange way, every pizza night is an echo of something ancient. A reminder that we are still the same species sitting around the same fire. Only now, the fire is inside a modern oven, and the stories are told through glowing screens. Yet there remains one final irony. For all its global fame, authentic Neapolitan pizza remains remarkably simple. Flour, water, salt, yeast, tomatoes, mozzarella, basil. That's it. No billion-dollar marketing strategy created the original pizza. No focus groups. No corporate consultants. Only poor people trying to make tomorrow slightly easier than today. There is something profoundly human about that, because history repeatedly demonstrates that many of humanity's greatest achievements emerge from unexpected places. Jazz was born in marginalized communities. Blue jeans were designed for laborers. Coffee houses began as gathering places for ordinary people. And pizza emerged from crowded Neapolitan streets where survival itself was a daily challenge. The next time someone tells you history belongs to kings and generals, remember pizza. Remember that the choices of ordinary people shape the world far more often than we realize. A mother stretching dough. A worker buying dinner after a long day. An immigrant opening a small restaurant in a foreign land. These moments matter. Collectively, they change civilization. Today, the global pizza industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars. Millions of people work within its ecosystem. Entire careers depend upon it. And every day, new variations appear. Some will disappear. Others will become traditions. History is still being written. Perhaps somewhere tonight, in a tiny restaurant no one has heard of, someone is creating the next great pizza style. After all, that is how this story began. Not with certainty, but with experimentation. And maybe that's the final lesson hidden inside every slice. Pizza exists because humanity has always been willing to combine old ideas in new ways. Ancient flatbread met American tomatoes. Italian ingenuity met global migration. Tradition met innovation. And somehow, against impossible odds, it all worked. So tonight, when you open a pizza box and the steam rises into the air, pause for a moment. Look at it closely. You're looking at 12,000 years of human history. You're looking at farmers cultivating grain beneath ancient skies. You're looking at sailors crossing dangerous oceans. You're looking at immigrants arriving with dreams in their pockets. You're looking at workers in Naples turning hardship into art. You're looking at the story of us. Because pizza was never merely a food. It was a message carried across centuries, that even in our poorest moments, humanity possesses an extraordinary gift, the ability to create joy from almost nothing. And perhaps that's why pizza conquered the world. Not because it was perfect, but because we aren't. It is messy, adaptable, complicated, shared, endlessly changing, just like humanity itself. And somewhere, in the distance, another oven door opens. Another pizza emerges. Another family gathers around a table. The story continues. It always will.